In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a scrappy log cabin quilt top with almost no measuring whatsoever. Hi friends, welcome back to Karla Created. If you're new here, I'm Karla and I absolutely love sewing. And if you do too, then perhaps you should stick around. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you a scrappy quilt that I've just finished making, where I didn't measure any of the piecing to make each block. It was such an enjoyable process not having to think about any mathematics and worry about cutting my pieces the wrong size, which I have done in the past. It also was a fantastic scrap and stash buster project and allowed me to get through quite a bit of my fabric scraps. Now, if you have watched any of my content in the past, then you probably know that I like to use unconventional fabrics in most of my quilts. I have been saving these tiny little velvet scraps for a really long time for the purpose of using for the centers of a log cabin block quilt. Now I've got a mixture of all different sizes. Half of them aren't even square. There's some pink velvet and brown velvet, and now that brown velvet is actually from a vintage armchair that I reupholstered, and I kept all of the velvet fabric that I took off the armchair, which I just think is such a cool little story to tell. When someone goes, hey, this is a cool quilt, I can then say, yeah, the centers of those blocks are from an old armchair. Anyway, so these will be the centers of the log cabin blocks that I'm making. And now I've also gone through my fabric scraps as well as my stash, and I've pulled out two different tones of fabrics. I have a lighter, low volume, florally cream colored selection, I guess. And I've also got a browny, orangey, warmer, darker toned or high contrast selection. And what I'm essentially going to be doing is making my blocks with one side in the lighter colored fabric and the other side in the darker color fabric. You end up with this really cool two-toned block that can be used to make a variety of different quilt top designs, which I'll show you a little bit later. What you need to do is first select all of your fabrics. I like to separate my fabrics into light and dark colored piles, just because it's easier then to pull the right fabric and sort through them. Next up, you'll need to cut out your center squares. A log cabin quilt can be in any size. They can even be rectangles. It really doesn't matter. It's often called the hearth, which I did not know. I just learned this recently. Strips of fabric, which are the logs of the block, are then sewn around the square in a spiral type fashion, building outward one strip at a time. So to each side of that center hearth, I guess. Each new strip is added to the side of the block, trimmed if needed, which I'll show you in a sec, and then pressed before the next strip is added. I have finger pressed a lot throughout the making of this quilt top, but I also did do a press with my iron at different points when needed. Well, I have been having a lovely time sewing these really cute scrappy blocks over the last couple of days, just here and there. Whenever I have a free couple of minutes, I sit down and sew. But I thought I'd just quickly record something that I think is a good tip if you're wanting to make a quilt like this with this kind of methodology, I guess. Obviously, this log cabin block method is pretty stock standard. There's lots of proper tutorials for how to do this, but if you want to do it in the way that I'm doing it, which is a very scrappy, low waste kind of way, whereby I am using all of my smaller bits of scrap, even these sort of pieces, and maximizing the use of all of them, what I do is, see this one here? I have attached this very, very large piece here, and I'm going to cut this down, right? But before I cut this, I mean, I can cut it, and some of them I do, but I'm starting to get smaller pieces of the scraps. So I need to be a little bit more careful of cutting these bits down prior to aligning the next strip of fabric. So what I'm going to do is, before I cut this excess off here and reuse the bit that I cut off, I'm actually just going to sew this strip on first. And then I know exactly where I need to cut this part off, and then I save this bit. Okay, so I've stitched that. And then now I use my rotary cutter, and you don't have to use your rotary cutter, but this is a longer edge. So I just find it easier to use my rotary cutter. If they're smaller bits, I just use my scissors. And there we go. How I know where I need to sew the next strip is the side that has the 3 different pieces. So 1, 2, 3. So I know that that's the side. I have made a couple of mistakes. I've not unpicked them. I've just rolled with the punches and left them as is. I also am pressing them out towards the piece that I just sewed on, just to keep the seams as flat as possible. Finger pressing for the most part, and then I would get a batch of them together and take them to my machine. My iron. Another thing I thought I should probably let you know is some of the bits are, you know, probably not wide enough for me to cut in half, like this one here. If I cut this, it's only going to be, I'll end up with less than an inch once I attach the next strip on. So I'm kind of, I'm just playing it by ear with whether I trim them down or not. This piece I'm not going to trim down because I adore this fabric and I don't have very much of it. And I figure, well, I'll balance it out on the other sides eventually. I have this really big piece of this. I can call this vintage because I literally bought this fabric when I was 16. I guess it's vintage now because things from the 90s are now considered vintage, right? That's slightly depressing. And yes, don't come at me in the comments for how crinkled this is. I might actually need to iron this piece because it's going to be very, very difficult for me to stitch on in the crinkled state that it's in. But not too crinkled that I can't cut a piece. It will work. I will iron that before I stitch that down. That needs to be ironed. Let's have a look at what other bits we've got here. I have been chain piecing these as I go. I'm working in sort of small batches of 4 or 5, just because you do them one at a time. You could probably do them all at once, but I like this. I'm not sure what finish size block I will aim for. I was thinking of trying for a 12.5-inch block because I have 20 of these for the centers, and 20 blocks would give me I think roughly a 50-inch by 60-inch quilt, 48 by 60. But I'm not sure. I haven't even really figured out what kind of layout I'll do with these yet. I just really enjoy the making process and being creative and playing with fabrics. I think this type of designing as I go just works really well for me, and I find it so incredibly enjoyable. I'd love to hear if any of you are the same. What do you think of these scrappy blocks?
I really like them because like this like checkered kind of pattern matches like with them. And then like I really like that type of pattern.
Yeah.
And the like pattern there. And I think they look really good together.
Do you like how they've got like the soft?
Yeah, that's one of my favourite bit. This
pretty cool, hey? Look at this tiny little one. Do you know that this brown fabric is like older than me?
Really?
And it came off that armchair in Neve's room.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
How cool is that? Now, I decided to keep my blocks relatively square. However, you can do a crazy style log cabin block if you wish and have all sorts of different angles within your block. I decided to go with relatively square, so I kept most of my lines parallel to one another. You'll notice as well that the scraps and pieces of fabric that I'm using to make my blocks. They're already in a whole bunch of different sizes. I've got strips of 2.5-inch strips from previous projects. I've got larger pieces from my stash, a whole variety of different shapes and sizes, and this is exactly what you want. However, if you only have larger pieces of fabric, this is perfectly fine too. Now, once you've made all of your blocks, the fun part is where you can create your quilt top design. The orientation of your light and dark sides can determine a quilt top design. And it's as simple as that. I would love to know in the comments whether you think that I chose the best design option. I think it's going to look really cool maybe as a wall hanging, because I only made 8.5-inch sized blocks and I made 20 of them. So the quilt isn't particularly big, but it is big enough to be a wall hanging, and I think it would look really cool in my bedroom. However, I do have another idea about perhaps using the rest of the scraps to make a bit of a scrappy border to just make the quilt a little bit bigger. And perhaps I could turn it into a cot size quilt. Not that I need a cot size quilt, but maybe a cool gift for someone one day. Although I know no one really who's going to be having a baby anytime soon. What do you think I should do? Do you think I should make the quilt bigger somehow, or do you think I should just turn it into a wall hanging? I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. And as always, if you like this video, please give it the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you are interested in sewing, or if you're interested in quilting, or if you just liked hanging out. Yeah, I enjoy hanging out with you and I love reading all your comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.